First contact with human medicine. The glittering spires of Zyx'tal Medical Academy stretched toward the stars, its crystalline structure capturing and refracting the light of three suns. Inside, Dr. Vex'lor, a sixth-year resident with 4 tentacle-like limbs and iridescent blue skin, adjusted his neural interface as he prepared for the day's grand announcement. "Can you believe we're getting a human doctor?" whispered Melix, a gaseous entity contained in an environmental suit who floated beside Vex'lor. "I've heard they still use sharp objects to cut into patients." Vex'lor's skin rippled with patterns of discomfort. That can't possibly be true. No advanced species would resort to such barbarism. The Academy's grand lecture hall hummed with the excited murmurs of over 200 medical professionals from across the galaxy. Some communicated through pheromones, others through bioluminescent patterns or subtle gravitational waves, all perfectly translated through their neural interfaces. Director Cathalix, a 12-foot-tall crustacean-like being, clicked her massive pincers for attention. The sound resonated through the hall, immediately silencing the crowd. "Esteemed colleagues," her voice translated smoothly through everyone's neural implants, "today marks a historic moment in our 4,000-year history. The Galactic Medical Confederation has finally approved Earth's application for membership, and as part of our cultural exchange program, we welcome the first human medical professional to our academy." A side door opened, and a small bipedal creature walked in. By Zyx'tal standards, she was tiny, barely 5.5 feet tall, with only 2 arms and 2 legs. Her skin was a warm brown, her hair pulled back in what Vex'lor's database identified as a ponytail, and she wore the traditional white coat of Earth physicians. "Meet Dr. Sarah Chen from the Mayo Clinic on Earth," Director Cathalix announced. "She specializes in what humans call emergency medicine and trauma surgery." Dr. Chen smiled, revealing flat white teeth, not a single fang or serrated edge among them. "How did humans tear their food?" "Thank you for the warm welcome," she said, her voice confident despite being surrounded by beings that towered over her. "I'm honored to be the first human physician to join your prestigious academy, and I look forward to both teaching and learning from all of you." Vex'lor's skin flashed with patterns of curiosity. How could such a fragile-looking creature possibly survive medical training, let alone perform procedures on other beings? Director Cathalix continued, "Dr. Chen will be joining the emergency response team, and Dr. Vex'lor has been assigned as her orientation partner." Vex'lor's skin immediately paled to a light azure. Him, partner with a human. His 4th tentacle twitched nervously as he felt hundreds of eyes, sensory organs, and other perceptual apparatuses turned toward him. After the assembly, Vex'lor approached Dr. Chen tentatively. "Dr. Chen, I am Vex'lor, 6th-year resident in quantum cellular regeneration." "Call me Sarah," she replied, extending one of her upper limbs. "It's nice to meet you, Vex'lor." Vex'lor stared at her outstretched appendage, uncertain what to do. Sarah laughed. "Right, different customs. On Earth, we shake hands as a greeting. It's a sign of friendship." "Ah, physical contact as social bonding. Fascinating." Vex'lor carefully extended his primary manipulator tentacle, which Sarah gently grasped and moved up and down. "There now we're properly introduced," she said with another smile. "So what's our first order of business?" "I am to show you our emergency response center and explain our protocols," Vex'lor said, leading the way through the Academy's shimmering corridors. Sarah matched his pace easily, showing no signs of discomfort in the slightly higher-than-Earth gravity. "I've studied your emergency protocols handbook. Quite comprehensive, minus 204 distinct procedures based on species, condition, and environmental factors." "Yes, precision is essential in xenomedicine," Vex'lor replied. "One cannot simply apply the same treatment to different species." "Of course not," Sarah agreed, "but sometimes you need to improvise when time is critical." Vex'lor's skin flashed patterns of concern. "Improvise? That sounds dangerous. Before Sarah could respond, an alarm blared through the corridor. Vex'lor's neural interface immediately translated the emergency code. Level 3 trauma in docking bay 7. A Thoraxian freighter pilot suffered rapid decompression. "Let's go," Sarah said, already running toward the nearest transport tube. Vex'lor hurried after her, his tentacles extending to increase his speed. "Dr. Chen." "Sarah, we must first collect the appropriate emergency kit for a Thoraxian. Protocol dictates." "You get the kit," she called over her shoulder. "I'll assess the patient. Every second matters in decompression injuries." When Vex'lor arrived at docking bay 7, specialized medical kit in Tau, he found a scene of controlled chaos. The Thoraxian, an insectoid being with 6 limbs and a chitinous exoskeleton, lay on the floor, his normally green exoskeleton turned a sickly yellow. 3 of his breathing spiracles had ruptured from the decompression, and viscous blue hemolymph leaked from the openings. And there was Sarah, without a proper sterilization field, without specialized tools, pressing what looked like pieces of cloth against the ruptures. "Dr. Chen." Vex'lor's skin flashed in alarm patterns. "You're contaminating the wounds. The protocol for Thoraxian decompression is treatment pod immersion and microgravitational stabilization." "There's no time," Sarah said calmly, not looking up from her work. "He's lost too much hemolymph. His equivalent of blood pressure is dropping fast. I need to stop the bleeding first. But the manual pressure could cause an exoskeletal fracture. And those cloths are sterile gauze pads from my emergency kit." Sarah glanced up briefly. "I need you to prepare a hemolymph transfusion. Now." The authority in her voice spurred Vex'lor into action despite his misgivings. He quickly set up the transfusion apparatus from his kit, while continuing to watch Sarah's primitive technique with horror and fascination. She had somehow slowed the hemolymph loss, and was now using a small tool too. Vex'lor's skin paled to near white. Physically Stitch closed one of the ruptures in the Thoraxian's spiracle. "You're using thread to close the wound." Vex'lor couldn't keep the shock from his voice. "Sutures," Sarah corrected. "Sometimes the old ways work best in a pinch." She worked with astonishing speed and precision. "Got the transfusion ready." Vex'lor connected the transfusion apparatus to one of the Thoraxian's fluid intake valves. "Ready. But Dr. Chen, the protocol clearly states." "Protocols are guidelines, not gospel," Sarah said, finishing the last suture. "Sometimes you have to adapt." To Vex'lor's amazement, the Thoraxian's color began improving almost immediately. The patient's sensory antennae, which had been drooping lifelessly, now twitched with returning consciousness. By the time the full emergency medical team arrived with a proper treatment pod, the crisis had largely passed. The Thoraxian was stabilized, his vital signs returning to normal parameters. Director Catholix herself arrived to assess the situation. After reviewing the patient's status, she turned to Sarah. "Dr. Chen, you deliberately ignored established protocol for Thoraxian decompression trauma." Sarah stood her ground, though she barely reached the director's thoracic segment. "I made a judgment call based on the patient's critical condition. The time required to follow the complete protocol would have resulted in fatal hemolymph loss." "And these sutures?" Catholix's pincers clicked with curiosity as she examined the neat rows of stitches. "A temporary measure until proper regenerative treatment can be applied. They'll hold the spiracles closed while the transfusion restores hemolymph volume." Catholix was silent for a long moment, her compound eyes studying the human physician. Finally, she spoke. "Unorthodox, primitive, and yet effective. Perhaps there is something to learn from human medical practices after all." As they walked back to the medical center, Vex'lor couldn't contain his questions any longer. "Do all humans treat patients so physically?" he asked. Sarah laughed. "You mean, do we all get our hands dirty?" "Pretty much. Our medical technology isn't as advanced as yours, so we rely more on direct intervention. But the risk of contamination is minimized through proper sterilization procedures," Sarah finished. Look, Vex'lor. Humans evolved as persistence predators and problem solvers. We're hands-on by nature. Persistence predators. Vex'lor's skin display patterns of alarm. Don't worry, we've mostly evolved past that, Sarah said with a grin. But that instinct to act directly, to physically intervene, it's still in our medical philosophy. Sometimes technology creates distance between doctor and patient. Vex'lor considered this as they entered the medical center. I must admit, your methods were effective, if alarming. That's just the beginning, Sarah said. Wait until you see how we handle multiple casualties or field surgery. That's when human doctors really get creative. The patterns rippling across Vex'lor's skin betrayed his mix of horror and fascination. Something told him his partnership with this human would challenge everything he thought he knew about medical practice. As they parted ways, Sarah called after him. Tomorrow, I'll show you my emergency field kit. It includes something called duct tape. You wouldn't believe what we can fix with it. Vex'lor wasn't sure if he should be terrified or intrigued. Perhaps both. One thing was certain, medicine at Zyx'tal Academy would never be the same again. The quarantine crisis. 3 standard weeks after Dr. Sarah Chen's arrival at Zyx'tal Medical Academy, the station's artificial day cycle began like any other. Vex'lor was reviewing patient files in the staff lounge, his 4 tentacles simultaneously manipulating different holographic displays, when Sarah burst through the door. "Did you hear?" she asked, her face flushed with what Vex'lor had learned to recognize as excitement. A transport ship from Proxima Centauri just docked with 27 passengers showing symptoms of some unknown illness. Vex'lor's skin rippled with the pale green patterns of concern. Unknown pathogens fall under Protocol 772B. The entire docking bay will be quarantined, and patients will be processed through isolation chambers for diagnosis. They're setting up now, Sarah said, already heading back toward the door. Come on, they need all available doctors. By the time they reached Docking Bay 4, the scene was one of meticulous, orderly response. Hovering med drones were constructing sterile corridors, while staff in full containment suits prepared the complex machinery of the station's advanced quarantine system. Director Catholic stood at the command console, her massive pincers manipulating the controls with surprising delicacy. Dr. Vex'lor, Dr. Chen. Good. We have 27 patients of 11 different species showing similar symptoms despite their physiological differences. What are we looking at? Sarah asked, accepting a containment suit from a dispenser. Elevated core temperatures, mucous membrane inflammation, and neurological disorientation. Catholics replied. The ship's AI report's symptoms began approximately 30 hours ago, shortly after departing Proxima Centauri station. Vex'lor quickly accessed the appropriate quarantine protocols through his neural interface. Standard procedure is to place each species in separate isolation chambers and run full bioscans before any direct contact. That could take hours, Sarah frowned, already stepping into her containment suit. Some of these patients might not have that long. Safety protocols exist for a reason. Dr. Chen, Catholics reminded her. Cross-species contamination could turn a manageable outbreak into a galactic pandemic. I understand, Sarah said, but we can still examine patients while the isolation chambers are being prepared. At least do a preliminary assessment. Catholics's compound eyes studied the human physician for a long moment before she replied. Very well. You and Dr. Vex'lor may conduct initial triage, but no physical contact without full containment protocols. As they approached the ship's airlock, Vex'lor noticed Sarah checking the pockets of her containment suit and adding several items from her personal medical kit. What are you doing? He asked. The suit's integrated medical systems provide everything needed for assessment. Sarah smiled. Just bringing a few extras. Old habits. The scene inside the transport ship shocked even Vex'lor's professionally detached sensibilities. Passengers of various species lay or sat throughout the main cabin, many displaying obvious signs of distress. A Valerian crystal entity had dulled to an alarming amber color. 2 Medusan floating gas bags had condensed to half their normal size. A family of insectoid krill were clicking their mandibles in obvious pain. Life signs are stable but deteriorating across all species, Vex'lor reported, scanning the room with his suit's sensors. Quarantine pods will be ready in approximately 47 minutes. That's too long, Sarah muttered, already moving toward a particularly distressed Arcturian, whose translucent tentacles were writhing uncontrollably. We need to start treatment now. Dr. Chen, we can't administer treatment without proper diagnosis. Vex'lor protested, his skin flashing warning patterns beneath his containment suit. Sarah knelt beside the Arcturian, her scanner hovering over its quivering form. This looks like a neurotoxin, not an infection, she said, studying her readings. Similar indicators across multiple species. This isn't a disease outbreak. She stood suddenly and addressed the ship's computer. Ship, what was the last meal served to passengers? Standard nutrient packages were served 12 hours into the journey. The ship's bland voice responded. Any special ingredients? Anything new or different in the shipment? After a brief pause, the ship replied. Nutrient packages included a new protein supplement, sourced from Proxima Centauri IV, approved for all listed species. Sarah turned to Vex'lor, her eyes bright with discovery. It's food poisoning, or rather, a toxic reaction to this new supplement. That's why it's affecting different species similarly. They've all consumed the same toxin. Vex'lor processed this information, his tentacles twitching with excitement. If you're correct, then Protocol 772B is inappropriate. We should implement Protocol 418, Toxic Ingestion Response. Exactly, Sarah nodded, already pulling something from her pocket, a small kit of Earth-manufactured items. And first step is to get this toxin out of their systems. Before Vex'lor could respond, Sarah had removed a vial from her kit and was approaching the Arcturian again. This is activated charcoal, she explained. Ancient human remedy, but effective for absorbing toxins in the digestive tract. You can't possibly use an untested Earth substance on an Arcturian. Vex'lor's skin flashed alarm patterns so brightly they were visible through his suit. It's inert, Sarah assured him. And Arcturians have a digestive system similar enough to mammals that it should work. We don't have time to synthesize individualized treatments for each species. Before Vex'lor could protest further, Sarah had mixed the charcoal with water and was helping the Arcturian consume it through its central feeding orifice. Dr. Chen. Phallux's voice boomed through their comm systems. What are you doing? The sensors show you administering an unregistered substance. It's activated charcoal, Sarah replied calmly. A basic toxin binder. Director, this isn't a pathogen outbreak. It's mass poisoning from a contaminated food supplement. We need to start gastric decontamination immediately on all patients. A heavy silence followed before Phallux responded. Explain your reasoning. Sarah quickly outlined her diagnosis, pointing out the timing of symptom onset after meals and the similar neurological effects across physiologically different species. After a moment of consideration, Phallux said, proceed with your treatment for the Arcturian. We will monitor results before applying to other patients. Within minutes, the Arcturian's tentacles stopped their painful writhing, and its color began returning to normal. Vex'lor's scanners confirmed decreasing toxicity levels in its system. Remarkable, he admitted, watching the rapid improvement. Such a simple solution. Sometimes the old ways work best, Sarah replied with a smile, already preparing treatments for the others. Now we need to modify the approach for each species' biology. What followed was a masterclass in adaptive medicine that left Vex'lor and the other Zyx'tal physicians alternatively horrified and impressed. For the Medusans, Sarah created a gaseous form of the charcoal that they could absorb through their membranes. For the crystalline Valerians, she developed a solution that could be applied to their external surfaces where toxins were excreted. Most shocking to the watching alien doctors was Sarah's treatment of a particularly severe case, a Rigelian with 4 stomachs, all contaminated with the toxin. When the charcoal treatment proved insufficient, Sarah pulled out another device from her kit. "What is that?" Vex'lor asked, noting the simple plastic tube. "Gastric lavage tube," Sarah explained, preparing the instrument. "In human medicine, we sometimes call it a stomach pump. It's going to let us wash out the toxins directly." The watching medical staff collectively recoiled as Sarah, with gentle efficiency, inserted the tube down the Rigelian's primary feeding tract and began the process of flushing out the contaminated contents. "Barbaric," whispered one of the Zyx'tal nurses, their luminous appendages dimming in distress. "Effective," countered Catholics, watching as the Rigelian's vital signs stabilized. Sometimes primitive techniques have their place. By the time the quarantine pods were finally ready, most patients were already showing significant improvement. The crisis was nearly over before the Academy's elaborate protocols could even be implemented. Later, in the post-incident review, Director Catholics addressed the medical staff. "Today's events have been educational. Dr. Chen's unorthodox approach saved valuable time and likely prevented several fatalities." Vex'lor noticed Sarah sitting quietly, looking slightly uncomfortable with the attention. However, Catholics continued, had this been an actual pathogenic outbreak, such direct intervention could have proven catastrophic. "Moving forward, we will develop new protocols that incorporate both our technological safeguards and more direct interventions when appropriate." After the meeting, Vex'lor found Sarah in the staff lounge, drinking what humans called coffee, a stimulant beverage that most alien species found either toxic or hallucinogenic. "That was impressive work," he said, his skin displaying patterns of sincere admiration. Sarah shrugged. "Just basic emergency medicine. On Earth, we deal with mass casualty situations all the time, often with limited resources." "But how did you know it was food poisoning so quickly?" "Our diagnostic protocols would have eventually reached that conclusion, but it would have taken hours." "Pattern recognition," Sarah explained. "When you see enough cases, you develop an intuition. Plus, I've treated a lot of food poisoning in my career. Humans are constantly eating things they shouldn't." Vex'lor's skin rippled with laughter patterns. "A useful skill at a multi-species medical facility, it seems." "Today was just a taste of human emergency medicine," Sarah said, taking another sip of her coffee. "Wait until you see how we handle trauma cases." "I'm not sure the Academy is ready for that," Vex'lor replied, only half joking. Sarah's expression grew more serious. "You know, Vex'lor, your medical technology is incredible, far beyond anything we have on Earth. But sometimes I think it creates a distance between doctor and patient, a reliance on protocols over intuition." Vex'lor considered this. "Perhaps there is a balance to be found. Your hands-on approach combined with our technological precision." "Exactly." Sarah's face lit up. "That's the future of medicine, the best of both approaches." As they continued their discussion, neither of them noticed Director Catholics observing them from the doorway, her compound eyes glittering with thoughtful consideration. The human doctor was disrupting centuries of established medical practice, and perhaps that wasn't entirely a bad thing. Little did they know that their greatest challenge was yet to come, a crisis that would test both human ingenuity and alien technology to their limits, and forever change medicine throughout the galaxy. Paradigm shift. The catastrophe began during a routine gravitational calibration of Zyx'tal Medical Academy's central axis. No one, not even the station's most sophisticated predictive algorithms, anticipated what would happen when a micro-meteoroid swarm intersected with the calibration field at precisely the wrong moment. Vex'lor was demonstrating a cellular regeneration technique to a group of junior residents when the station shuddered violently. His 4 tentacles instinctively anchored him to the nearest support column as alarms blared through every corridor. "Emergency protocol initiated," announced the station's AI in a calm voice that belied the severity of the situation. Gravitational field instability detected in sectors 17 through 24. All personnel proceed to emergency stations. Vex'lor's neural interface immediately flooded with status reports and damage assessments. The news was grim. Multiple hull breaches, structural failures in 3 sectors, and worst of all, the gravity generators were fluctuating wildly throughout the medical center. This way, he instructed the residents, leading them toward the designated emergency shelter. They had barely reached the corridor when another violent shudder rocked the station, and the artificial gravity in their section failed completely. Objects, equipment, and people suddenly floated upward, colliding with each other and the ceiling. "Stabilize yourselves," Vex'lor called out, using his adhesive limbs to anchor to the floor. Most of his students, being various tentacled species, managed to secure themselves, but several bipedal and crystalline beings tumbled helplessly. Amidst the chaos, his neural interface chimed with an emergency medical alert. The trauma center was reporting massive casualties and calling all available medical staff. As Vex'lor navigated the disorienting zero-gravity corridors, he received a direct communication from Director Zyx'tal. "Dr. Vex'lor, report to Trauma Hub 3. Dr. Chen is implementing an emergency triage protocol." When Vex'lor finally reached Trauma Hub 3, the scene that greeted him defied all standard emergency protocols. The large circular chamber, designed to house 20 specialized treatment pods, had been transformed into something that looked more like a battlefield medical camp from Earth's historical archives. In the center of it all stood Sarah Chen, her white coat splattered with various colors of blood and bodily fluids from different species. She was calling out instructions to a mix of medical staff and even non-medical personnel who had been pressed into service. Gravitational trauma victims to Zone 1. Decompression injuries to Zone 2. Crush injuries to Zone 3. She spotted Vex'lor and waved him over. "Vex'lor, thank goodness. I need your expertise on crystalline physiology in Zone 4. Dr. Chen, what is happening here?" Vex'lor asked, his skin displaying patterns of confusion and alarm. "Where are the treatment pods? The automated surgical systems? Power fluctuations knocked out half the medical tech," Sarah explained rapidly, applying pressure to a wound on a Medusan, while simultaneously instructing a nurse on treating a Thalaxian's injured appendage. "And we got too many patients for the remaining pods. We're going old school." "Old school," Vex'lor echoed, watching in astonishment as Sarah efficiently tied off a bleeding vessel on the Medusan, using what appeared to be simple thread. "Battlefield medicine," Sarah clarified, finishing her task and moving immediately to the next patient. "Now those crystalline beings in Zone 4 have microfractures from the gravitational shear. I need your expertise to help stabilize them." Still stunned, Vex'lor made his way to Zone 4, where 3 Volarians and a quartz beam lay on simple examination tables. Their normally lustrous crystalline bodies were dulled, with visible fracture lines running through their structures. "The resonance stabilizers are offline," reported a junior doctor. "We can't generate the proper harmonic frequencies to repair their lattice structures." Vex'lor's training immediately suggested Protocol 329C, placed the crystalline beings in stasis until proper equipment could be restored. But a glance at the fracture patterns told him they might not survive that long. What would Dr. Chen do? He muttered to himself. The answer came to him suddenly. She would adapt. "Bring me the ultrasonic cleaning equipment from maintenance," he instructed the junior doctor. "And find any piezoelectric materials you can. Crystals, ceramics, even some metals will work." Within minutes, Vex'lor had repurposed the cleaning equipment to emit the specific frequencies needed to stabilize the crystalline being structures. It wasn't as precise as the medical-grade resonance stabilizers, but it halted the progression of the fractures. "Now we need a bonding agent," he said, thinking aloud. "Something that can hold their structures together until proper regeneration can occur." "Like glue?" asked the junior doctor, clearly influenced by Sarah's approach. "Precisely," Vex'lor replied. surprising himself with his enthusiasm for this unorthodox solution. "Find Dr. Chen. She's likely to have something suitable in that kit of hers." Across the trauma hub, Sarah was performing what she called triage surgery on a thalaxian with a severe thoracic injury. With the surgical pods offline, she was operating manually, using sterilized instruments and her own two hands. "Vex'lor needs a crystalline bonding agent," the junior doctor reported to her. "Something like glue." Without breaking her concentration, Sarah nodded toward her emergency kit. "Top pocket, blue container labeled epoxy. Tell him it's a 2-part resin. Mix equal parts just before applying." The improvised treatments continued for hours as the station's engineers struggled to restore stability to the gravitational systems and power to the medical equipment. Throughout it all, Sarah moved from patient to patient, performing procedures that made the alien medical staff alternately wince in horror and gasp in amazement. She reset broken limbs manually, drained fluid accumulations with simple tubes, and at one point used a device she called a hand-cranked centrifuge to separate blood components when the automated systems failed. "Is she actually sewing that wound closed?" whispered a horrified Arcturian nurse as Sarah sutured a gash on a fellow human engineer's arm. "Primitive but effective," replied Vex'lor, who by now had developed a grudging admiration for human medical techniques, "and currently more reliable than our malfunctioning auto-healers." The crisis point came 6 hours into the emergency, when a critically injured Zyx'talian was brought in. The 8-limbed administrator had suffered severe internal injuries when a gravity fluctuation had slammed them against a bulkhead. "Their primary circulation system is failing," Vex'lor reported, his skin patterns showing urgent distress. "They need a full surgical pod. All pods are either occupied or offline," Sarah said, quickly scanning the patient with her handheld device, "and they won't survive transport to another sector." "Then, there's nothing we can do," one of the Zyx'talian doctors said, his skin darkening to the deep blue of morning. "There's always something we can do," Sarah countered, already prepping the surgical tray. "I'm going to operate." A shocked silence fell over the nearby medical staff. "Manually?" asked Vex'lor, his voice barely audible. "On a Zyx'talian. Their circulatory system has 15 major vessels and 37 regulatory nodes." "Then you'll need to guide me," Sarah said, meeting his gaze steadily. "Vex'lor, I need you as my assistant. Your knowledge of Zyx'talian physiology combined with my surgical skills might be their only chance." What followed was perhaps the most unorthodox surgery ever performed at the Academy. With Vex'lor providing real-time guidance, Sarah carefully opened the Zyx'talian's thoracic cavity and began to repair the damaged vessels and nodes. "The tertiary pulsation node is showing signs of cascade failure," Vex'lor reported, monitoring the patient's life signs through his neural interface. "Then we bypass it," Sarah replied without hesitation, her hand steady as she rerouted a vessel. "Just like a human heart bypass, the secondary node can handle the load temporarily." "That's not in any protocol," Vex'lor protested weakly. "Write a new one," Sarah suggested, a grim smile visible behind her surgical mask. "Necessity is the mother of invention," old human saying. To everyone's amazement, including Vex'lor's, the improvised surgery worked. The Zyx'talian's life signs stabilized, and by the time the primary medical systems came back online, the patient was stable enough to be transferred to a regeneration pod to complete their healing. As the emergency finally wound down, 28 hours after it began, Sarah collapsed into a chair in the staff room, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. 142 patients treated, she murmured, rubbing her bloodshot eyes. "No fatalities. Not bad for Stone Age medicine." Vex'lor settled beside her, his skin displaying patterns of deep respect. "Your methods may be primitive, Dr. Chen, but their effectiveness is undeniable." Sarah managed a tired smile. "High praise, coming from you." "I have been recalibrating my assessment of human medical practices," Vex'lor admitted, There is wisdom in your approach that our technology-dependent protocols sometimes lack. And there's incredible value in your technology that we humans can only dream of, Sarah countered. Imagine what we could accomplish by combining both approaches. Their conversation was interrupted as Director Catholix entered, her massive form somehow managing to look both imposing and humbled. Dr. Chen, Dr. Vex'lor, she began, her pincers clicking softly. The medical board has reviewed the emergency response logs. Your unconventional methods saved many lives today. Just doing our jobs, Sarah replied modestly. Perhaps, Catholix continued, but you have also done something far more significant. You have demonstrated the limitations of our over-reliance on technology and rigid protocols. The director's compound eyes focused on Sarah. Dr. Chen, the board has authorized the creation of a new department at the Academy, Emergency Response and Adaptive Medicine. We would like you to head it, with Dr. Vex'lor as your deputy. Sarah's exhaustion seemed to evaporate.